Safe to say that last night probably could have gone a lot better for the Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we've got some stuff to talk about. You know, the Jets played against the Kings yesterday, and things did not go super well. Bit of a rough game, and I think that there are some trends that are worth chatting about. I know that this part of the schedule is a little brutal. The Jets are dealing with some injuries, but I think we're seeing some trends from last year and stuff that I mentioned at the beginning of this year that, folks kind of gave me some stick for, but in the end, I kind of think the Jets may be proving at least some of my concerns right. Some things are, not a problem, but there are some issues worth chatting about. We'll do so in just a quick minute, but before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return because new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, the Jets, for the most part, have had a pretty good run of form this year, but I think the past couple of weeks, especially with this road trip, have seen some peaks and valleys. The last several games for the Jets have all ended 4-1 in either the Jets' favor or the opponent's favor. And, I think it's probably worth noting that how the Jets have played in a lot of these games is not good. Now, I think that there's plenty of room to suggest that, fatigue and injuries and health have played a role. But I think at the end of the day, Winnipeg is dealing with some stuff that I thought at the beginning of the year might show up. Now, it's taken a good while for some of these concerns to be more apparent. And I think that, for the Jets, it's probably a helpful thing. Winnipeg probably built itself a beautiful cushion to allow for moments where, you start entering a bit of a rut like the Jets are in now. Winnipeg, I believe, is 4-4 in their last few games. And so, things have been a little bit up and down. Again, it's not that big of a deal. And I don't think that it's something that people should lose their minds over. But, if we're being honest, I think the Jets have kind of shown that they still have a lot of things to work on. And in this game against the Kings, the Jets basically got outskated from front to back. There was just never really a point at which Winnipeg was all that competitive in this game. I thought that this would go very differently. I was expecting the Jets to have a pretty good handle on LA, but instead it was a totally different experience. The Kings pressured and forced the Jets into mistakes. Winnipeg just really didn't have the skating legs, and from top to bottom, pretty much everyone got smacked up. Even the Lowry line, which is the line that you would expect to do really well, was just atrocious. If I had to pick out standout performers for Winnipeg, I guess Kupari drew a couple of penalties and even earned himself a penalty shot. Didn't score, but, still did enough. Otherwise, though, it was just hard to find much of anything to really celebrate here. I did think Gabriel Velarde had a really solid game. He earned himself a power play goal, and I thought he was noticeable on the ice. But aside from that, not much else going on. LA just really kind of schooled the Jets. And I guess the Kings were also fairly motivated to perform. Obviously LA had a really embarrassing game against the Sharks just a couple of nights before. So LA was probably playing a little pissed off. And I thought that would be the case. But all that said, I just thought the Jets would be able to slow down the Kings a little more. And they really didn't. Winnipeg just seemed to be the second best to everything, whether it was dump and chase, puck recoveries where they were dumping it and hoping to forecheck and force the Kings into mistakes, or trying to just complete passes. It was a rough performance all around. And so it was one of those games where I think the Jets, they're going to look at the tape and probably be pretty frustrated. And not everything should be put on Winnipeg's shoulders. There are some really big problems with injuries right now. Sandberg being down is a huge loss. I think that that's very obvious to say. Scheifele is also not 100%, and I want to spend some time talking about him because this is getting to be a really big problem. The Scheifele thing, the Jets aren't talking about it. The media is sort of asking about it. The team has kind of been a little non-committal, but this is becoming a much bigger concern. And I'm starting to get to the point where I wonder if the Jets maybe need to start thinking about what to do with Scheifele over the next few weeks, because the Jets are 18-5. That is a fantastic record to work with if you're needing to maybe make some adjustments to your team. So we'll chat about that later. But I think the other problem that this game in particular showed was, aside from Scheifele, the top line, barring Velarde, had a rough go of it, really, overall. Scheifele and Connor struggled to make anything happen. Velarde was really more effective on the power play than anything. And the Namestnikov line with Perfetti and Ehlers, wasn't really the best showing from them. Perfetti had, a good opportunity and rang one off the crossbar, so a little bit unlucky. Ehlers had, a couple of opportunities where he'd maybe get a good chance to shoot and instead overcooked a play or something. And Namestnikov, to me, just looked like he was behind on everything. Vlad is becoming a bigger and bigger issue against top-end teams. And I think, these squads that are going to pressure and be speedy against Winnipeg are putting that second line under a lot of stress. And all of that has a downstream effect where your third and fourth lines, I guess you can call it your shadow second line, because that's really what the Lowry unit is. It makes their game less effective too. So overall, it was just a tough outing. Riddick really didn't have to do anything. Hellebuck kind of got left out to dry, and to be honest, the Kings, it's not like they got like the world's craziest chances against the Jets, but they just kept piling on shot after shot after shot, and eventually, stuff just gets through, whether it deflects off of somebody. Kopitar gets a nice little deflection in front of the goal. Just a frustrating outing. Phil Deneau, I think, had a really good game against the Jets. He kind of shoveled one home for a good, hardworking, grindy goal. Ehlers and Perfetti kind of got caught a little bit puck watching, not really marking the late man. And so just a lot of individual errors and mistakes that really cost the Jets in this one. But I think at the end of the day, you can also just say they were competitive, right? It happens, but it's been happening a little more frequently than I think the Jets would probably like. And I want to talk about the top lines in particular, because these skill lines are issues that we've sort of covered in the past. Last year, the top line was a subject of consternation for the 15 to 20 games that it was playing together all healthy. The Namestnikov line we've had some thoughts about earlier this year, and it just keeps being an issue where I sort of wonder if Arniel is really willing to change stuff. Scott was not afraid to do so earlier this year, and then things have recently started to shift to where he's not making the adjustments in-game that he was at the start of the season. And I kind of want to know why. I wonder if there's pressure from somewhere to not make those changes. I don't know if he feels like it just wouldn't be effective. One of his only changes in this game against the Kings was to demote Perfetti to the fourth line and put Iafallo alongside Ehlers and Namestnikov, which really didn't do anything. I don't know that demoting Perfetti really sends a particularly positive message either. Cole has had some quieter games recently, but it's not like I think there's a lack of effort. It's just that line really seems out of sync, and it's kind of like Ehlers or nothing at this point. So, yeah, a lot of things not really going right for a couple of the biggest lines for the Jets, and I want to spend a couple of minutes chatting about that because it does kind of have a rather big impact on the rest of what the Jets want to do. But before we dive into all of that, just thought it would be worth telling you about our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you're watching the Ravens this weekend against the Eagles, or maybe you were watching Cowboys and Giants, I don't know how you put yourself through that, but maybe you did. Maybe you're getting a hunch and you're thinking you know who's actually going to win these matchups. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page that you're placing your bets. So you'll always make the most informed bets to follow that hunch up. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. While we're at it, thought I would also let you know about our friends and partners at Gametime who have some great ticket buying options and offers for you right now. Gametime totally understands that when you add a ticket to your cart and you suddenly see your price jump from $30 to $60 at checkout, you're just absolutely confused. That's why they offer you an option to toggle called all-in pricing that lets you see what you're paying up front. They know that nobody likes surprises, we don't appreciate hidden charges, and Gametime doesn't want to pull the wool over your eyes either. In fact, they've made it easier than ever to get top deals by offering a brand new feature called Gametime Picks that filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And of course, they all come back with the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and they even offer you seat views before you buy, so you're actually getting a good sense of what you're paying for. If you want a Jets game, either regular season or postseason, they'll have you covered there. If you're interested in maybe going to the Blue Jays once they start getting back in season next year, then great time to get in. Obviously, this is a perfect opportunity to save time and money because they help you curate only the top deals so you save and have fun. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just chatting about some up and down stuff with the Jets and a couple of perhaps not worrying trends, but things worth keeping an eye on for the next couple of weeks as the Jets are trying to get through this rather difficult, rather challenging stretch of road games. We're almost at the end, friends. Obviously, for Winnipeg, it's been grueling. The loss of Sandberg, the injury to Scheifele, Vlad's been getting beat up. He had to take a maintenance day yesterday. So just a rough couple of weeks. And, finally we're getting to some home games in December. And even then, there are still lots of road games in between. So, yeah, the NHL schedule makers have not really done us any favors. But, amidst all of that, I still think it's probably worth discussing these skill lines because they're just not working that well. Even in the games the Jets have been winning recently, for the most part, it's taken a while for the skill lines to really have an impact. And that's even if they do, right? They've been great at, 5v4 on the power play. There's no question that the top line trio is amazing on special teams. But at 5v5, you're just really not getting enough from the Scheifele and Namestnikov lines. And that was even before Scheifele was perhaps dealing with a pretty significant injury. Against slower teams, you don't really notice it as much. The forechecking and speed tends to be where the Jets really struggle. And, I know it's not really helped by the Jets defense also having some issues. The Morrissey-DeMello pairing continues to be a little bit on the rough side. Right now, we've got Fleury and Pionk playing together, and I'll be honest, don't want to ever see that pairing again. I just hope that the plan is to get Heinola some time up with Pionk at some point because Fleury, we can pretty much tell, is not really able to help Neil with some of his more defensively, I'm trying to figure out how to say this nicely. His defensive issues, right? He's got some challenges there. Let's be honest. The puck management's not great. The passing can be a problem. And it's just something that, you sort of expect with Neil because where he's really going to give you value is up the ice. And Fleury's not necessarily a player who's able to help Pionk be his best. Sandberg was a more defensively attuned, strong back-checking presence and somebody that, Pionk was able to really rely upon, and now he doesn't have that. So going to be interesting to see how Pionk tries to adjust, but I think for the Jets, the bigger question is, how can you fix things internally? The top line and the skill line, the Namestnikov skill line, they're not really giving you enough. They'll have flashes, and you definitely see them, where they'll start to take over individual shifts, but on the whole, you're just not getting some of these bigger performances that you need out of them. And I can't really say that I have a particularly easy answer for this because I'm going back and forth mentally a lot about what the Jets need to do. I was kind of excited more for the trade deadline, but I'm starting to think that the Jets may need to make a move sooner than later. I don't really love this plan, and I think that there are some legit questions about whether or not it's too early to make a trade, especially because the Jets don't seem to know entirely what they have internally. But in light of everything, I sort of wonder if Scheifele is to play, for the remainder of his injury, whether he gets better from it or not, I really don't know. But assuming he doesn't get benched or get shut down, he's going to have some way to limit his minutes. I know that he's probably going to be against this, and I'm sure that the front office doesn't love this, but Scheifele just can't be playing the role that he needs to with the injury that he's got. It's very apparent that it's not only affecting his faceoffs, his passes are off, his board battles are off, everything from him is at like 50%. And it's bad because we all know that he can be one of our most dangerous scorers, and the Jets do not have an internal replacement for him. No one on this team can really bring what Scheifele brings. And so for him to have this injury now it's unfortunate, but I think the good news is the Jets have built themselves a really good lead. And I want to talk about why I think that's helpful now, especially with respect to Scheifele later in the show. But assuming that Scheifele is going to keep playing for the foreseeable future, the Jets are going to have to figure out how to make do without his great release and passing. And I think you probably need to start thinking about changing the top line a bit. I do wonder if maybe shifting Vilardi to center might help a bit. If Scheifele just completely moves out of that area and Vilardi maybe tries to play center again. Last time he did this, it didn't really go super well, but he's already taking faceoffs. He's generally good in that respect. But faceoffs for me are only a very small part of the game of a center. You need more in the creativity, in the defensive side of things, and at times in transition. And I think Vilardi does some of these things better than others. I don't know if it's really the worst plan to try, but it might help at least give Scheifele some time to take some shifts a little bit less intensely and maybe heal up faster. I really don't know what's wrong with him. And until the Jets figure that out, that kind of sits as a real dark cloud over this trio. I've thought about whether putting Ehlers up there would help. Maybe you could try something like Connor, Vilardi, and Ehlers. They've never really played together, and I don't know what the chemistry would be like. Personally, I think at this point it would be safer to pair Perfetti and Connor together. Those guys, I think, have a lot of natural chemistry. I think you'd help get Perfetti going, and Connor has really been all effort so far. You really don't see him taking shifts off, and with him really leading the way on that top line on a pretty consistent basis, I'm inclined to take him away from Scheifele because I think Connor can just do it on his own. He's been really good this year. I think it's, to the point where he's kind of leading that line's charge, and maybe it would actually help him a little more if he's able to get some lineups who can keep pace, or line mates who can kind of keep pace. Vilardi, I think, has done a good job of that so far. Scheifele, when he's healthy, absolutely. But so far, the trio recently has had a rough stretch. And so, a change might be necessary. Now, who do you put at center? That, I think, is a harder question to answer. Maybe this is where you try Vilardi, Connor, Vilardi, and Perfetti. There could be some symmetry there with Vilardi crashing the net down the middle and Connor and Perfetti playing, tiki-taka passes and looking for Vilardi's stick down low in front of the goal. But it's just not a great situation because, like, Namestnikov really can't do it. Vlad is trying his best, and I just don't see it. You could also try Lowry there. Maybe that would be something of interest. The thing with Lowry is that we've never really seen him played with high-end skilled players, and it would also take away, Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton, which that line's been brutally effective. And so are you willing to risk breaking that up to give Lowry skill to work with and see if he can't help carry the load while Scheifele maybe has some reduced impact? I don't know. I think regardless of whatever way you try to look at this, it's just not ideal. And this is kind of why I keep circling back to the idea of maybe thinking about a trade. Again, I think it's a little early to go for that. If you can figure out if Lowry is maybe capable of leading more of this offense, maybe it would reduce the need to try and go acquire somebody right now. Obviously, towards the trade deadline, I think would be much better, where the cap hits are going to be lower. You'll get those prorated salaries and stuff. And the Jets might be able to have a bigger selection than what they will right now. But as it is, the Jets are trying to basically scrape by, and I think that that's kind of how I'm looking at arranging these lines. With Scheifele, I just don't know if he'd really be willing to take a demotion. My guess is probably not. But if that's the case, then you've got to get Ehlers up there. I think Nick is probably one of the few guys who's got the legs to keep moving and keep that line going. Maybe you try something like, the classic ESV line. I don't know that that's going to work at this point. Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde had a pretty good run last year, but that was when Scheifele was not inhibited by his injury. If it is the case that he's not really playing at 100% right now, then I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, you can try it. You can also try Connor, Scheifele, and Ehlers. I just think you need to get Nick up there and figure out the rest from there. Nick is obviously going to have some defensive warts and passes that maybe don't go where you want them to. But at the end of the day, the bulk of the offense that he creates is probably one of the few that's going to help a struggling Scheifele and a Connor who, he's doing his best, but he's only one guy. He needs somebody else who can really keep pace. And I think while Velarde has done a good enough job, it's just not working 100%. And I think Velarde can probably play in a variety of roles, right? Whether you play him with Lowry, maybe, I think that could be a really interesting duo. Velarde could maybe help out Namestnikov. I don't know. Again, the more I try to piece through some of this, the more it just feels like, again, I kind of come back to thinking about a trade. But it's still early. It's still tough. But there is kind of one question that I think is really hanging over all of this, and it's what do you do with Scheifele? And I'll be honest, I think it's time to shut him down, at least for a short bit. I think the Jets are not really wanting to do this because, A, if he goes to IR, obviously you don't accrue that cap space. But the other thing is, the Jets just don't internally have a replacement for Mark. You try and think about who else would come off the bench or get a call up from the Moose, and Lambert's not really ready. Gustafson's not going to come off the bench and do it. So who's going to be your first line center? Do you really think Adam Lowry is going to be able to carry the load? I don't know. You might as well find out. But I think it's about time that the Jets maybe make use of that really good advantage that they've built and bench Scheifele. It's really not a question of him not wanting it or not trying hard enough. He's just too injured to play, and I think it's becoming a really big issue. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment, but before we go too much further, I wanted to tell you about our friends and partners at Built Rewards. If you're a renter, I'd start taking advantage of Built if I were you. We all earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy, but you should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Built changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There's absolutely no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to by joining joinbuilt.com at /LockedOnNHL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL to start earning points on your rent payments today. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just chatting a little bit about the Jets and kind of where they are at this point and needing to make a big choice with Mark Scheifele. Now, Mark Scheifele, is a guy that I love watching play. I know that he's had some up and down games the past couple of years, but at the end of the day, we don't have another first-line center, right? He is our one of one. And without him, this team just really isn't the same. But I think the Jets are better off playing without him because right now, he just looks like he can't do anything. Face-offs are a struggle. The forecheck is a struggle. Passes and shots are a struggle. He's either sending the puck wide or away from sticks. We're just not really seeing Scheifele that we're used to. And Mark doesn't even feel like he's able to play at like 60 or 70%. It feels like 50 or even less. And that's a shame because we all know that Mark is a really pivotal force on this team, in terms of our scoring and creativity. Again, he is one of our best players and playmakers. And so for him to be at this stage, it has to be a really bad injury. The Jets aren't talking about it. They've been very quiet, but we can all see it. He does not look good. And it might be time to take advantage of that 18-5 record and sit Scheifele for a week or two. I don't know if what he has is, the kind of thing he needs surgery for. My suspicion is that may be why they're postponing it, that they're concerned that this is a longer term thing, and that if they have to bench him, he's going to have to try and have some real repair work done, and he's going to miss significant time. At this point, though, I think I would rather take the hit now. The Jets have built up a huge lead. They're firmly in a playoff spot, and I think if your top center is ailing the way that Mark is, I don't think it's the worst plan to maybe shut him down. Let Lowry take over, put Gustafson into your bottom six, bring up maybe Kupari onto the second line or something. Do I think it's a great plan? No, but I think the Jets don't really have that many options, and I'd much rather have a healthy Scheifele for the second half of the season than the first half. Obviously, Winnipeg is in a really good spot, and so they have the luxury of maybe kicking the can down the road, but I think the longer that Scheifele keeps going with this, the worse it's just going to get. He really doesn't seem like he's able to really impact the play, and it's definitely hurting the first line as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that, Lowry's going to be the fix for the first line either, but in the meantime, just getting a healthy Scheifele back in a few weeks or even months would probably be a world of difference. Mark, when he's at 100%, is such a force on the ice, and I think for the Jets, they might be better off doing it. Now, I don't think he would actually accept that, and I think he'd probably feel really upset at the suggestion that he should sit. But if you're the Jets and you're thinking about the future and your postseason run, Mark, being shut down for a bit might be in your best interest. I love Scheifele, and I think that he's really put as much of himself out there as he can. But in these games where he's just not even able to take a face-off or, accurately make a clean pass, it's probably time to start thinking about that shutdown. Watching him labor out there, it's just not fair. It's not fair to him. I think it's hard on his line mates who are trying to make the best of the situation. And for Scheifele, I think he's probably super frustrated, right? He's used to not really having these issues. He hasn't had them before. But it's going to happen to everyone, and I think for Scheifele, it wouldn't be the worst if he maybe had some time off and just healed up. The Jets have a very much a next man up mentality. They've shown that the past couple of years. They all fight for the badge. They will step up when somebody else isn't able to, and I think that that's a great attribute to have. And I think the Jets would also be served kind of decently finding out what they maybe have in some of these players. It would necessitate line changes. It would necessitate, some swaps and stuff. And that might actually help Winnipeg figure out what they really need going forward. Is Lowry a secret top six center? Could he play really well with skill? You might be able to find out now with this opportunity to maybe give Scheifele some time off, let him rest and recover, and go from there. Do I think it's going to be a great revelation what the Jets find? Probably not. I think we all kind of see where things would end up if you have to bench Scheifele, and I think that the record would probably take a hit. But the Jets are a really strong team. They've started leaning heavily on Hellebuyck recently, and Hellebuyck, for the most part, has really answered the call. So, you know what? Why not ask the goalies to do a little bit more work and give Scheifele some time to heal up? That'll help you in the long run. I think it'll make the December stretch easier. And, a healthy Scheifele coming back at the end of this year or even the beginning of the next calendar year, it's just better for everyone. So curious to know how the Jets handle this. Maybe they try and make a trade. There aren't that many centers out there that I think would really be able to help. Brock Nelson would certainly be a guy I'd be interested in. But I think anything that doesn't directly address the fact that Scheifele's still going to have to play the first-line center role probably isn't what you're looking for. The Jets are going to have to figure out something. I'm sure that they're internally really concerned about it. Your top-line center looking like this is not a great sign. So just hoping that whatever is ailing Mark, goes away quickly, that he's able to get back up to speed because, there aren't many players that the Jets can live without, but I would put Scheifele firmly, in the camp that you really can't go without him for long. He's one of our most important players. There's really no one else on this team that brings the sort of offense that he does, and without him, the Jets just aren't the same. So Time to figure out how to get it back to 100% and up to speed. But curious to know what your thoughts are. Do you think the Jets should shut him down? Do you think a reduced role would make sense? Let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll have coverage of Winnipeg versus Knights later this week, but for tonight's show, like I said, that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.